Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. So the third image...
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's called Robson Glacier.
Yeah.
Do you say glacier or glacier?
Glacier?
Yeah.
Glacier would be French.
Or British. I think British people say glaciers.
They
But-
might. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, possibly, yeah.
Anyway, so Robson, I've never been to Mount Robson, but I'm assuming this is the one in BC.
That's right. This is very near the BC-Alberta border in the Canadian Rockies. In
Yeah.
fact, the picture is not Mount Robson.
Oh, okay.
Mount Robson, the mountain you can see in the foreground on the right there is Rearguard Mountain.
Okay.
Mount Robson itself is just to the right of that,
Okay.
but doesn't show in the picture. But the focus of the picture for me is the Robson Glacier,
Yeah.
which starts on Mount Robson and kind of wraps around the back of Rearguard Mountain, and you can see that in the middle, in the middle distance there. Yeah, this is a really interesting image of change in the environment, and it's change that's taken place in this case over the last 20,000 years or so. So the last glaciation, the height of the last glaciation was about 25,000 years ago. At that time, the glacier, Robson Glacier, would have wrapped all the way around Rearguard Mountain and continued 20 kilometers down the valley and joined another bigger glacier down there. So this whole valley would have been almost filled with ice.
Wow.
So then 20,000 years ago, because of changes in the Earth's orbital parameters, you might have heard Milankovitch cycles.
Well, assume you're speaking to a very dumb person. So what's a Milankovitch cycle?
Milankovitch cycles are periodic and very systematic timed changes in the tilt of the Earth, changed a tiny bit, but also the shape of the Earth's orbit around the sun. It's an elliptical orbit, but it varies from being almost perfectly circular to just a little bit elliptical.
Right.
And those changes take place over tens, hundreds of thousands of years, and they have a significant effect on the Earth's climate. And it's those changes that made for the timing of the glaciations that we've had over the last million years. Glaciers have come and gone on a cycle of about 100,000 years.
Wow.
Anyway, so the last glaciation peaked at about 25,000 years ago, and then the orbit changed a little bit. I mean, it didn't. It's always changing in a very small amount, but the change was towards more warming in northern latitudes, and so glaciers started to recede. And so starting 20,000 years ago, the Robson Glacier receded all the way back up and around and behind Rearguard Mountain.
Oh, really?
So if you were standing there 5,000 years ago at this spot, you would not even have seen a glacier.
Okay.
And then the cycle of warming switched to a cycle of cooling, and the glacier started to advance again. By the year 1300 or so, which is the beginning of what we call the Little Ice Age. You may have heard that term before. It's what caused there to be ice on the Thames and in all different parts of Europe. Anyway, that glacier that you can see there, it had advanced by 1300, and you can see down at the bottom left corner of Rearguard Mountain, there's kind of an arcuate shape of green trees across the valley, and the stream cuts through that. So that's where the glacier was starting 1,300 years ago, and you can also see on the hill in the distance, there's this sharp boundary between eroded and non-vegetated stuff, and then above it more vegetated. So the glacier in AD 1300, filled that valley once again, but only as far as where that moraine is, that arcuate moraine thing. And then it would have continued to expand down the valley probably, but starting around 1850, we started changing the climate.
Yeah.
So since then, between 1850 and now, this photo was taken in 2012, the glacier has receded again another 2 kilometers up the valleys to where you can see it now.
Wow.
So there's been tremendous change
Yeah.
at this location over the last 20,000 years, and there will be more. And in the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years, it will again recede out of sight from this viewpoint.
Right.
But the important thing here is that we're looking at two different processes here. One is those Milankovitch cycles that I talked about that have had natural effect on the climate and have caused this glacier to recede and advance. And then starting 150 years ago, anthropogenic effects that have caused it and virtually every other glacier on the planet to recede dramatically. And that's the problem that we're in right now.
One of the things that I absolutely adore is that here is this photo of a landscape image that by itself is dramatic. It's really beautiful. It shows huge country, like huge landscape, and then so that's one level. Then you, with your training and with your distinctions and your way of how you read this image, because you have the extra language and concepts and whatever, reveals a story that is extremely rich and extremely historical in a sense, because as you pointed out, you can really see a line where the vegetation, like above the glacier, and that you can see that it's been carved away because of what you've learned and what you understand. You can actually project and rewind the sort of the film clip of the glacier growing and then receding again, which to me is just absolutely fantastic. I love it. Beyond, we must address anthropogenic climate change. Like, what other call to action does seeing this spark in your brain? When you see this, what is the main kind of? I'm sure there are many. Like, what are the many kind of impulses that spark in your mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is an indicator of climate change. This is just one of the many things that we can look at and say there's climate change. But it's more than that, because the glacier, you can see where it is in the distance there. Although it's a bit dirty in places, it's actually mostly white.
Right.
White surfaces reflect sunlight, and so when glaciers are large, a lot of the sun reaching the earth just reflects back into space and does almost nothing to heat the earth. But as a glacier recedes, a lot more dark surfaces are exposed, and that absorbs sunlight, that adds to the warming. So a glacier, and glaciers in general, are a beautiful feedback machine.
Right.
They accelerate warming in this case, but they also accelerate cooling. So as the glacier would expand, there'd be less or more bright surface, and so more light. So, and that's just one of a dozen important feedbacks that are part of the climate system. And people don't think about those too much. Really, they're the workhorses of climate change. It the changes that I talked about in the Earth's orbital patterns, they're very subtle. They just make a very tiny difference. But it's the feedbacks that accelerate or drive the climate to change dramatically. And one of them is just the change in the area of glaciers. And as I said a while ago, this is just one glacier. There are tens of thousands of glaciers around the Earth, and they're all doing that. Virtually, one or two exceptions maybe, but 99% of them are receding. And as they recede, they're reflecting less light, so it's warming up. And the same applies, of course, to ice on the ocean surface in the Arctic Ocean, northern Canada, Russia, Alaska, what have you, Greenland, in that area. The amount of ice covering the Arctic Ocean has declined dramatically over the last 15 years. And so when ice melts, dark ocean water is exposed, and there's a dramatic difference there, even more than in this picture here,
Sure.
between the reflectivity of the surfaces. So that just makes warming accelerate even faster. But there are lots of other feedbacks that are scary.
How strong is that part of the science?
Oh, it's strong, but our understanding of it has evolved dramatically in the last several decades. I mean, people knew about feedbacks 100 years ago,
Okay.
maybe even 200 years ago, probably. But they didn't really understand the potential for that to change the climate.
Right.
And a lot of work is being done in this area now. So we do understand it better, and we do know that it's those feedbacks that have the potential to get out of our control. Now we know what we're doing to the climate. We're putting way too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere,
Right.
way too much methane, and I hope that we can change that.
Okay.
And gradually decrease the way we're changing the atmosphere and bring climate change under control. But we don't know how the feedbacks are going to continue to work.
Right.
And there will, and possibly already has, and this will be a whole series of tipping points where what we thought was under control gets out of control because of feedbacks
Yep.
accelerating the climate change. And if we've crossed into over one of those tipping points, and their tipping points are going to exist in a whole bunch of different ways, like in forest ecosystems, there's tipping points,
Sure.
and in all sorts of things, in the Arctic sea ice tipping points.
Yeah.
If we cross those tipping points, it's going to become much more difficult for us to bring the climate back into a stable state.
Right.
So really important to understand these tipping points.
As a person who's trained at looking at geological time, which is, millions of years, and right now, can we say that climate itself ever does have a steady state?
So the first part of your question was, has it ever been stable? It has been stable for long periods of time, but it has always changed.
Yeah.
But the really important difference is the rate of change.
Right.
So it's changed dramatically in the past. I mean, there was a time 700 million years ago when the entire Earth was frozen over. The oceans were frozen over right down to the equator. There was hundreds of meters of ice on the surface of the ocean. Mm-hmm. And that lasted for 10 million years. So during that time, it would have been unchanging and just freakishly cold.
Yeah.
But eventually that changed and so on. But all of those changes are really slow. And, as you've heard many times, it's the rate of change that matters. And right now, the rate of change is just unprecedented.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.